Welcome in, latest episode of that SEC podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bratton. I go by SEC Mike on them Twitters, and we are back with another SEC prediction show with Steven Lassan, senior editor, Athlon Sports. Steven, how ready are you for Week 13 predictions?
Mike, I am ready for actual games. Let's put aside the playoff hypotheticals, the angry tweets for a week, and let's get some actual games. We've got 2 full weeks of SEC ball before the championship game, so I'm trying to enjoy every second because you and I both know the dark days of February when there's no games on. It's pretty bleak for us college football fans.
Yeah, it's wild, Steven. But that's all anybody wants to talk about is playoff. But it'll figure itself out. Thanks to this weekend, thanks to next weekend, thanks to championship weekend. I feel like all these puzzle pieces are going to come together. But before we get there, we got to remind the cousins, Steven. We are brought to you by MyBookie, the online sports book. Head on over to mybookie.ag today. That's the website. All you got to do, go over there, mybookie.ag, sign up. The account's free. You don't even have to put money into it. But if you want to, make an initial deposit, put in the promo code THAT SEC, that's THATSEC over at MyBookie, and they will double your initial deposit. And all you got to do is fade my picks, fade Steven's picks, and fade Shane's picks, and you cannot go wrong. You will go 3-0 over at MyBookie. Steven, how confident are you in this week's MyBookie lock of the week, which you are about to reveal at the end of the episode?
Fairly confident. You know, I was just thinking though that if you take a lock, I take a lock, and cousin Shane takes a lock, and we all take different ones by process of elimination, the one we don't take is the one the cousins should bet on, right?
Yeah, no doubt. And man, what a guy. Benjamin, I appreciate you, brother. He just gifted a membership to Ram Dog. Them dogs stick together. Ram, welcome to the family. I appreciate you, brother. And I appreciate you, Benjamin, for gifting that membership. But Steven. We got a lot of games to get to, so we got to get into it. But before we do that, as always, we got to also remind you guys, we got PrizePicks. Maybe you're not into wagering on the games. Maybe you want to get in on the daily fantasy action. And there's no better place than PrizePicks. Go over to PrizePicks. Again, this is daily fantasy. They have projections for players when it comes to yardage, interceptions, touchdowns, things of that nature. And all you got to do is more than or less than. You hit 2. That's all you got to do, Steven, is just 2, and you'll win. You go over to PrizePicks, play $5, you'll get 50 instantly with the promo code SEC over at our friends PrizePicks. What's this week's PrizePicks selections that you got lined up for us, Steven?
Mike, the good news is if we're terrible at the locks of the week, we've been better at PrizePicks, right? So
we cannot miss on the PrizePicks.
Right. So at least we're giving the cousins something to win this weekend. We've got 2 games on the PrizePicks. The first one is Florida and Ole Miss, and I like a couple for the Ole Miss side of things. I'm going to take Jackson Dart, 1.5 passing touchdowns. I'm going to take the more than side. I love this matchup for Ole Miss in the passing game against Florida's secondary. I think Jackson Dart could have a huge afternoon. So I'm going to bank on him throwing 2 or 3 touchdowns in the Swamp on Saturday. I am also, little tip of the cap to our Big Ten fans who are still angry about Tennessee needing heated benches when it's 55 degrees outside. I'm going to take Caden Davis, the kicker for Ole Miss. He is at 7.5 kicking points. Give me the more than side of those. That's my 2 plays for Ole Miss.
I love him, Steven. I also love cousin JR. What a guy, JR. Doesn't matter what day, what time, doesn't matter any of that. When we go live, he donates a membership, and this time, Thomas Cox, you have been blessed by cousin JR. Merry Christmas early. Thomas, welcome to the family, and thank you, cousin JR. But back to your PrizePicks, Steven. I love that one. I've updated these little graphics. I'm trying to make them nicer and nicer each week. But yeah, Jackson Dart, you said it well. Quinn Ewers roasted this secondary. Now, it is in the Swamp, so a little bit different story. Ole Miss 2 weeks to prepare. Sounds like Trey Harris. Is that some gamesmanship? I don't know. But if he's back, feel great about Ole Miss going up and down the field. And And even Kiffin's starting to listen to me, Stephen. I don't know if he'll kick field goals or not in this one because they need style points, perhaps, for the. I mean, all they really got to do is win, but style points are going to be important. But with that defense they got, he's got to start kicking more field goals. He did that against Georgia, and it wasn't the deciding factor, but the riverboat gambler that was Lane Kiffin. had we gotten that one against Georgia, it may have come back to bite us, I think. So, I like that selection as well.
Yeah, I actually think, not to like dive too deep into the playoff, but I actually think Ole Miss is in a pretty good spot if they win the next 2 weeks. I mean, I think they're ninth last week. I mean, they're obviously close to the bubble, but they're in pretty good shape. So to your point, taking the points, not necessarily the worst thing, and maybe not going for it every fourth down. Although I do love watching JJ McGee's trying to get fourth downs. So that's one of my favorite moments in the SEC. Over in the other game on PrizePicks, Mike, I've got a couple plays here for Alabama and Oklahoma. I'll start with the easiest one. Jackson Arnold is at 175.5 passing yards. I'm going to take the less than side of that. With the maybe a banged up receiving core, maybe a banged up running back group. I know Alabama's secondary has been hit or miss this year, but Alabama's defense has been playing with more confidence the last couple of weeks. So I'm going to take less than Jackson Arnold, 175.5. For Alabama, I've got 3 plays for you. I like Jalen Milroe at 267.5 passing plus rushing. Oklahoma's defense is pretty good, but I feel like we've reached the point of the season where you have to use Jalen Milroe at every opportunity that you have because you need to win to go to the playoff. He's your best weapon. So I think Alabama, you empty the tank the next couple games. I like Jalen Milroe more than. I also like Jam Miller, 50.5 rushing yards. I'd go less than. He's been under that total in every SEC game this season. Oklahoma, I know their rush defense is pretty solid. I'd go less than. And one more. How about Ryan Williams, 53.5 receiving yards? This is just a hunch. It just feels like he's due for a big play. So give me the more than side of that.
Well, I got a good feeling where Steven's going to go with that prediction when we get to it in a minute. So, yeah, I can't disagree with any of those, and I can never disagree with JP. What a guy. He just gifted a membership to, this time, to Braden Thompson. Braden, welcome to the family. But, all right, Steven, like I said, we got a lot of games to jump into, so let's not delay any longer because you don't have any other prize picks, do you?
That's it. I hope they're all winners this week, Mike.
Okay, great. Yeah, and they have been here lately. So, again, trust us on this one. PrizePicks, promo code SEC. But Cousin Shane, he'll be a lot of Cousin Shane comments. He'll be here in about an hour to do a mailbag. But let's get into it, Steven, with the only game. I don't have a little preview thingy-majiggy because it is, it's going to be a blowout. Come on. Wofford coming to South Carolina. No point spread, no over-under. They won't even put it on games like this. But obviously, I would imagine, Steven, you got South Carolina winning. What will be the keys here against these Terriers with the Gamecocks?
Absolutely, Mike. I mean, this should be an easy win for South Carolina. And I love the timing of this matchup because you get sort of a bye week to get ready for Clemson. I think the number one thing is keep people healthy, no injuries, empty the bench, play a bunch of players. Also a chance for Lenora Sellers to build a little bit more confidence, finishing the season on a tear, really get a chance to kind of finish it here and then go to Clemson next week. So I like South Carolina big. Give me the Gamecocks 45-10.
Any chance, Stephen, that, again, I don't know that the committee is going to be like, oh, you only beat Wofford by 40, but any pressure for South Carolina, who's still fighting, still clawing, still scratching? I'm going to keep saying it until they lose. They may never lose again, Stephen, the way they're playing. But that style points, could help in a game like this. Could any shot that they really pile it on just for that?
I could see that. So Wofford is 5-6, and they are averaging only about 16 points a game, and they give up about 22. So that's not great when you score fewer points than you give up. But to your point, these games are hard to figure out because, like, how much do you play Lenore Sellers here? Do you keep him like in for a half and do you run it up, or do you just try to run the ball and get out with a win before anybody gets hurt? So I think style points do matter. The committee is not supposed to incentivize like margin of victory.
You
So,
gotcha. And you want to make sure you're rested up and healed up because next week is critical
right.
for many factors, but obviously the big in-state rivalry. But okay, I just figured I'd ask another one, Stephen. We don't have to spend a ton of time on here because the spread is inching closer to 50 here, Stephen. But UMass at them Georgia Bulldogs, and look at all them footballs favoring Georgia as they should. I mean this is another one, Stephen, where I don't want to say you got to rest for Georgia Tech because I don't think necessarily that's the case, but maybe rest. Georgia's pretty beaten up right now. What's your thoughts on this one? And can Georgia cover this massive 42-point spread? The over-under is 55.5 total points, and this will be an early one, 12:45 kickoff here on the SEC Network.
I think so, Mike. I mean, UMass is kind of in a weird spot. They fired their head coach. They have not been great on offense, and they really haven't been that great on defense this year. They have made strides over the last couple years, but if you look at how they played in the 2 games they played against SEC teams, they've lost by a combined score of 90-23. So it's been a pretty wide margin this year. Georgia is better than Missouri or Mississippi State. So I suspect this will be a probably an early afternoon for Carson Beck. I would love to see Gunnar Stockton, Jaden Rashada, see the quarterbacks for next season play a lot here. There's no reason, with as banged up as Georgia is, to play the whole game or into the third quarter with your starters. So empty the bench, keep people healthy, get ready for Georgia Tech, and don't suffer any more injuries because the injury report for Georgia is already significant enough. So I like Georgia 52-6.
Well, let me ask you this real quick. Again, we don't have to spend a ton of time on Georgia UMass, the biggest blowout potentially in the country this weekend. But I mean, we all know Georgia's got what it takes potentially to win the national championship, to win the SEC if they can get to the and heck, they may not even care about that. Just give us another week of rest here. But will you be waving any kind of red flag if this week is somewhat of a disappointment? And I get the spread's nearly 50 points. They're not going to lose this game. But we have seen it all season, Stephen. We're like, okay, they turned it on in the second half against Clemson. This is who Georgia is. And then 2 weeks later, they nearly lost to Kentucky. And then Alabama was just like a tale of two halves. So, one you're getting your ass kicked, the other you're doing the ass kicking. You figure, okay, they lost. They'll turn it on. I mean, Mississippi State was almost dreadful. And then you really turn it on against Texas and say, okay, they're back. Georgia's back. And then the following week against Florida, I mean, it's been said a million times, we'll never know the answer, but if DJ Lagway doesn't get hurt, Florida may have won that football game. And then they turn around and get beat down by Ole Miss, and then they turn around and do the beating against Tennessee. So I guess my point being is any concern that this is just who Georgia is, and they're severely lacking consistency this season.
It's a great question because I feel like Georgia's A game is good enough to potentially win the national championship still. I also feel like it would not surprise me if they play Alabama or Ole Miss in the first round of the playoff and get bounced because of how inconsistent they've been. To your point on this game specifically, it would not surprise me if like the goal is just to get the clock to run as fast as possible. Don't take any risk and get the heck out of there with like a 38-0 win. I'm probably a little bit too optimistic at 52-6. So it wouldn't surprise me if it's much closer. I will say, maybe with Gunnar Stockton and Rashada playing, like maybe there's some incentive to air it out late and try to keep the score high and give them some chances to throw. But I don't think UMass will present too much of a trouble here for Georgia.
Okay. Bold take here, Stephen. All right, how about another one? UTEP at Tennessee. Tennessee favored. Again, massive margin here. 41.5. Over-under's 52.5. This is another noon game here. They're not even televising this thing, Stephen. It's ESPN Plus. Probably doesn't even deserve that. But What's the chances that Tennessee is another one? Been fairly inconsistent all season long. The footballs favor the Vols, obviously, but they need some style points here. How do you see this one?
If you're a Tennessee fan, you definitely do not want a repeat of that Austin P game last year, 30-13. Oddly enough, Scotty Walden, who is now the head coach of UTEP, was the head coach at Austin P last season.
Oh no, not that guy. That guy I remember Tennessee fans hated him. He was acting a fool on the sideline.
Well, he might act a fool on the sideline if they keep this one close, Mike. It's going to be hard for UTEP to do that. I mean, they're one of the bottom 10 to 15 teams in the country. They have some skill talent on offense, and their defense isn't too bad in Conference USA play, but they lost, by 30 something to Nebraska. I think with Tennessee being at home, one of those empty the bench, senior day, a chance for Nico to shine a little bit against an overmatched team. I like Tennessee 51-7 here. I think Tennessee's offense needs a good performance to finish out the year, so I'm going to take them to kick it up a notch as they play the Miners.
Yeah, well, they need something like that, Stephen, because again, all they can really do is get style points this weekend. They must look impressive. Cannot, even a UTEP that they're favored by over 40 points. I mean, they need to go up and down. They need to go full Kent State here, Chattanooga, NC State to just again. They need help, but they can only do so much to help themselves. And really, the only way they can help themselves this Saturday is just destroy old UTEP.
100%. I mean, if you want a comparison, UTEP is slightly better than Kent State. Like they're probably like 130, 128. Kent State's like team 134. So UTEP's a little bit more of a challenge, not by much. But I think, Mike, to your point, I think the problem for Tennessee is it's hard to find the data points that gets them from out to in, barring help around them. So Tennessee sort of has to use style points and get help elsewhere, I think, at this point to make the playoff.
Well, it sounds like you're saying Tennessee really knows how to pick them. Chattanooga, Kent State, UTEP. Good Lord, I mean, you never know how awful these teams are going to be when you schedule them, but that could be the reason Tennessee sits at home, which would be unfortunate. All right, let's move on to this one, Steve, because this one far more intriguing than any of the games we've discussed yet. Louisiana Tech at Arkansas. Arkansas favored at home, as they should be, by 22 points. And the over-under 49.5 as we have it here. And this is a 3 o'clock Central kick here. How do you see this one?
Mike, I think the interesting thing about Louisiana Tech is their head coach, Sonny Cumbie, is he's got a background on offense. And you may remember him. He was a prolific quarterback at Texas Tech under Mike Leach. But actually what Louisiana Tech has been doing is that they've actually been better on defense this year. They were awful last year on that side of the ball. They changed coordinators and they are much better this season. They are averaging only about 21 points a game on offense. If you want to make a case that they're dangerous for Arkansas, they have lost 6 games, this being Louisiana Tech, and 5 of those have been by 1 score, and they played NC State, their only power conference opponent, really well. They actually led in the second half. So I think that when I think about this game for Arkansas, it's really, you have to take care of business here. Louisiana Tech also has a coach, Cumbie, on the hot seat. 2 coaches desperately need a win. And if you're Arkansas, you win this one and you're going to a bowl game. And I think that sort of signifies the direction of where they're going with Sam Pittman if they can pick up this win on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. Any concern though that again, I got the schedule up here. I mean, there was games like the UAB where they didn't, they kind of gave a half-ass effort, I guess you'd call it. Again, Oklahoma State, you were dominating, should have won. That changes the narrative a lot if you hold on. I know they turned out to be awful, but still at the time that was a ranked win. Texas A&M, I mean they were in it. Quite frankly, they were. Maybe should have won that game until late. A&M, let's give them credit. They dominated the fourth. If my memory serves, Nick Scorton made a huge play there, strip sack, and that broke the game open for A&M. That was a crucial moment. But point being, there is times where Arkansas's got these games that they're letting it slip through their fingers. I would even say that last week. There was Not that they were ever in control, but there was opportunities to win that game. And not only did they not win it, they lost by double digits at home. So level of concern, Stephen, that Arkansas kind of sleepwalks through this game, and they've been known to do it under Sam Pittman.
So if you were to compare UAB and Louisiana Tech, they're kind of hard to compare because UAB's starting quarterback has been out for the last few weeks. I thought at the start of the season, UAB was better, and they're probably pretty comparable. But to your point, I think UAB's offense was better than Louisiana Tech. So I think from a game kind of perspective, the fact that Louisiana Tech has had so much trouble protecting the quarterback, they've allowed 33 sacks this year. It feels like this is a game where SEC trenches should matter. Like they should be able to get Jaquindon Jackson and Taylon Green going here. So I am a little bit worried just because of the history here, but it also feels like one of those games with everything on the line, and Arkansas did expend a lot of energy last week. It just feels like they've got this opportunity right here to get that 6th victory, and I think they're going to do that on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. All right, so what's your official prediction here?
Give me Arkansas 34, Louisiana Tech 17.
Okay, yeah. That feels about right. 2 touchdowns, but again, this is, I don't want to call it a trap game, but this is one where I'm a little worried. After the rivalry game, I don't know if you're looking ahead to Missouri. Apparently Arkansas, they have no respect for Missouri. I don't know. I don't get it, but this is a tricky one. This is a must win. I'd hate for it to foresee it go sideways here for Sam Pittman and company.
Yeah, it feels like an opportunity, a very easy opportunity to get that 6th victory. So take care of business, get to a bowl game, and hopefully build on that next year.
All right, how about this one, Stephen? A conference matchup here. Conference the rest of the way throughout. Kentucky at Texas. Texas favored by 20.5 points at home. The over-unders 46.5. And this will be a 2:30 Central Time ABC game. The footballs favor the Longhorns, as they should, Steve. They haven't met since 1951. This is only the second time they've ever met. How about this, Steve? I don't know if you're aware of this. This will be Kentucky's 4th game of the season against a top 7 team. Not a top 10, a top 7 team. But they have fared quite well. They beat Ole Miss and Oxford, lost to Georgia by 1, and lost to Tennessee by 10. So, for whatever reason, Kentucky can play with the best of the best. They can't play with the worst of the worst for some reason. But here's where I'm really concerned here. Texas gives up less than 12 points per game, the number 4 in the country. Kentucky scores only less than 22. They're 109th in the country. So strength on abysmal weakness here. What's your thoughts on this one?
I think if you're a Texas fan, maybe there's some anxiety about seeing a Stoops on the other sideline, right? What I'm going with it. Speaking of style points, I think Texas could probably use a good showing here. No shame in what happened at Arkansas last week. Their defense has been awesome all season. It does feel like their offense could maybe clean up some things and get to another level. That also includes the way that Quinn Ewers is playing. But just in terms of style, the way that Kentucky's been able to kind of hang around against those top teams has been run the ball, make it ugly, shorten the game, low possessions. I just don't know if they're going to be able to do that in Austin. That feels like a much heavier lift. Now, their defensive line for Kentucky, they could absolutely, I think, cause some problems for Texas, and especially Deion Walker and that crew. They could definitely make life a little difficult for Quinn Ewers. But for me, that's the formula. If Kentucky's able to keep it low scoring, kind of hang around, they'll have a chance in the second half to make it interesting. I think if I'm Texas, I want to jump on Kentucky early and force them to actually kind of throw the ball, try to move the ball a little bit more on offense, get them out of their comfort zone offensively.
Any intrigue, Stephen, with old Quinn Ewers? It sounds like he will not go through senior day activities. What does it mean? Do we got a Dylan Gabriel situation brewing? We'll have to make a decision between Arch Manning and Quinn Ewers. I mean, he was asked this week too by do they treat you well down there, Quinn? And He hesitated. I don't know if you saw that, Steve, but he said, yeah, they're pretty good, basically. But they don't. I mean, based on the comments there, they are ready for the Arch era here. So any intrigue there with old Quinn Ewers, who, he's been efficient, not outstanding, but very good. Any intrigue here with Quinn and his status in the future up in the air?
Absolutely. I mean, is it the draft? Is it the transfer portal? Is it coming back to Texas? I would assume that Arch Manning is going to be the starter next year at Texas. There was one of those moments as you're going through the stats each week. And yes, Arch Manning has played some pretty favorable defenses when Quinn Ewers was hurt. It was a little shocking to see Arch Manning already have 6 completions of 40 plus yards and see Quinn Ewers have 4. Like, it feels like that number needs to change in a hurry if Texas is going to be able to win the SEC or go to Texas A&M and win next week. So I guess what I'm trying to bottle all this up is that it feels like the next couple weeks are really important for Quinn Ewers. He's got a big decision to make, but also the way he plays is probably going to help, kind of where does Texas fit into this pecking order of national championship contenders.
Mm-hmm. What best case scenario for Kentucky, though? How many points could they score on Texas, and how do they get there? Because quite frankly, I don't have much faith in old Brock to get it done at this point in time. Is it the running game? Deme Sume Kongbo, he is 51 yards short, Stephen, of 1,000. So he's quietly had a really good year. I know they got some good receivers. What's the path to Kentucky having some level of success on this really good Texas defense?
Yeah, I think I would watch that drive that Arkansas had in the second half and almost try to figure out what were they doing to move the ball, because they did a pretty good job of trying to establish the run. And of course, there was some other Taylor Green magic in there too. But it feels like they're going to have to be able to play that kind of game. Whether it's Karngbae, whether it's Vandegrift, Gavin Wimsatt, running the ball, taking a lot of time off the clock, low possession. So Texas has been really good on defense, especially against the run. I think it's hard for me to see them being able to win this game if it's high scoring. I think if you can get to 20 points or so, that's probably about the neighborhood you want to keep it. I mean, given like Ole Miss was about 2017 and 13-12 against Georgia, it feels like if it's 20-17 in the fourth quarter, Kentucky's got a chance.
Mm-hmm. How about this question from Aggies, Tacos, and Beer? Appreciate you, brother. SEC Mike Steven, what happens if Kentucky pulls the upset? Would Texas be left out of the top 12? I think the world would end in Austin, Texas. That's his comments, not mine. Personally, Steven, I don't think they would fall that far. Certainly they would fall, but out of the top 12, I think they'd be right there in that log jam of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, all SEC. What's your thoughts?
So Georgia was 10th. I would say Texas probably at least falls behind Georgia. The question would be, would Tennessee be ahead of them? I mean, Tennessee's got that really good win over Alabama. I would think they actually probably would fall behind Tennessee. Would you?
I mean, I don't know. The formula loves Texas, so I don't know. But just for the we need the uproar from Knoxville to continue, Stephen. So yeah, they'll be in front of Tennessee. I'll just say that just so we can get another week of angry Vol fans.
I think Texas would fall out. I think they'd be like 12th or so, and A&M would be like 13, 14, be back to back and setting up the showdown of potentially for the SEC championship game. I guess would it be if Texas loses? Wouldn't that also help Georgia potentially get to the SEC championship game?
Possibly.
Yeah.
But I still think the front runners would be A&M, assuming they beat Texas, and Alabama.
Yeah, I think the ultimate chaos scenario would be A&M and Texas both losing this week, which break out all the tiebreakers again.
All right, so are you going to give Aggies Taco and Beer his dream scenario here? Does Texas somehow lose as a massive favorite at home?
I don't think so, Mike. I think Texas takes care of business. Give me Texas 34, Kentucky 13.
Hey, Pop Goes the Culture says if Kentucky beats Texas, it would be the first time Ole Miss rushed the field for a game they weren't even playing in. How about that?
So do they rush the field in Gainesville? Or do they rush the field?
Yeah, I don't know. And we had one more super chat from Razor Bass 904. The only number smaller than Pittman's wins against Drink is the number of teeth in each of Missouri's cheerleaders have. But this is Sam's year. Go Hogs. His words, not mine. We love all the cheerleaders on this channel.
Mike,
I certainly can't be talking bad about people's teeth. Trust me.
Mike, can you imagine how next week is going to be? Like, it's Thanksgiving, so let's try to be nice to everybody, but it's going to be spicy on the SEC Twitters. I mean,
it's not,
rivalries.
It will not be friendly. I can promise you that, Steven.
It's going to be spicy. That is for sure.
All right, let's go to another one. Hopefully not a blowout. Hopefully we'll get a competitive. I want some competitive ball games, Steven. And this is another one of these ranked teams on the road, upset city. Same thing last year, or last week, excuse me. I was telling Steven off air. Last week we had 4 ranked SEC teams on the road. We had 3 of them go down. This week we also got 4 ranked SEC teams on the road. And one of them's mighty Alabama. Alabama favored by 13.5 over Oklahoma. The over-under's 47.5 total points. Night game in Norman. How about it, Steven? 6:30 Central, 7:30 Eastern on ABC. Thoughts on this one?
I'm going to go ahead and just nerd out for a second, because how cool is it that Alabama and Oklahoma are playing a conference game? Like the tradition, the helmets, the uniforms, all that stuff. So sorry, nerding out for a second over the history of college football, and just a cool moment. I think obviously the stakes are very high for Alabama. Going on the road in SEC play in a new environment is never easy. If you're Oklahoma, the chance to get bowl eligible and score a big upset for Brent Venables, and also coming off the off week. Is there any kinds of new things that Oklahoma can throw at Alabama? Because it does feel like it's a pretty heavy lift, given the spread, given the stakes, and given the results this season, that Oklahoma is going to be able to pull off the upset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be the story of the game, and how well Oklahoma, with their impressive defense, contains Jalen Milroe and Ryan Williams, who again, go back to your PrizePicks selections. Steve, it doesn't seem stopping them at all, apparently. He'll reveal his prediction here in a moment, but just based, I'm going off his PrizePicks here. But on the road, have some pride. Does Oklahoma's defense, do they continue to hold the rope? Heck, you couldn't blame them for letting go. I mean, if the offense gives them 10 points again, it's hard to see them battling for 4 quarters here. We need at least 20 from our offense, which would be the first time against a FBS opponent since Tulane. Because you remember the Auburn 7 was a pick 6 here. So
yeah.
It has been a while. So the confidence is not great, but 2 weeks to prepare. I don't even know which quarterback they're going. They may play both of them. What do you think the game plan is for Oklahoma at quarterback?
I would start Jackson Arnold. And I think maybe mixing in Michael Hawkins isn't the worst thing. I think, Mike, to your point, I think this game, if it's close, to me, Oklahoma's defense has a good beat on what Alabama is doing offensively. If you can bottle up Jalen Milroe and he doesn't do what he did at LSU and how he played against Missouri, if you can hold him in check and prevent big plays, then Oklahoma has a chance to make this game interesting. I think what I worry about for Oklahoma is defense comes out and plays well, but there's a turnover on offense, or that the dam eventually breaks on defense. Like they hang in there for so long, but the offense gets nothing going. They're on the field. Milroe makes a big play off of a scramble or a throw downfield, and it just kind of crumbles after that. I do think Oklahoma's defense can trade punches in this game, but offensively, Alabama's defense has played better. They're forcing some turnovers. We know Oklahoma's had problems with turnovers all year. Line of scrimmage, skill talent, all banged up. It's like Oklahoma's going to need to get a very low scoring game that maybe they score on defense again, potentially to win this game.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I mean, it's a must that they're plus in the turnover margin, in a game like this,
Yeah, I think their margin for error is very small in offense, regardless. If they were playing, whoever this week, but especially against a team like Alabama that is playing, I think, with a lot of confidence. Since that Tennessee loss, they've kind of ticked off a couple wins. There was the big win against LSU. Milrose playing well. Mentioned the defense. It just feels like turnovers. They cannot have a -2, -3. Like Oklahoma's got to be even or on the plus side of things. And, can you find a way is score on special teams. They had the fake punt against Missouri that moved the ball. They may need something like that here because it just feels like Alabama's on a little bit different tier the second half of the season.
Mm-hmm. And it would go a long way for Old Venables. Quiet the doubters if you can win a game like this. And if they don't win it here, then it's at LSU at night, despite what Lane Kiffin will his moaning. But LSU always gets a night game for some reason. But bowl game, it's not looking good for Oklahoma, is it?
Mike, it's tough to see. I think of the two games, getting Alabama at your place is probably a little bit more favorable than going on the road. Now, granted, who knows what LSU team is going to show up this week or next week. So it feels like this is, with the offensive coordinator search going on, there's an opportunity here with Alabama coming to your place to play well, maybe steal one. It's going to take a lot to go right, but there's also a lot at stake here for Oklahoma too.
Any last question I got for you, Steven, before you reveal your pick here. But again, night game, Oklahoma. Does that factor in at all in your decision?
Yeah, it does. I am always curious about the new stuff in college football right now. Like Ohio State played at Oregon. It's a conference game. All the new in the SEC, Alabama playing in this game, Florida going to Texas. I just think at some point, as much as the crowd and the stadium and the atmosphere, like at some point matchups and players end up mattering more, which is why I think there's a chance here that Oklahoma, coming off the off week, comes out, plays well early, and then the game flips sometime or in the second, third quarter.
All right. So what's your prediction for it?
You probably figured out by now I'm on Alabama this week. Give me the Crimson Tide 31-13.
Ooh. Glad we signed Venables to an extension. Okay. Let's go on to this one. How about this one, Steven? This could be a little trap game city. Another ranked team on the road in the SEC this week. Missouri at Mississippi State. Mississippi State's 2 weeks to prepare for this one. But the Tigers, who looked the best, I thought they looked all season last week at South Carolina, even though they lost. 7.5-point favorite. The over-under 57.5. 3:15 Central kick on the SEC Network. Thoughts on this one, Steven?
Mike, I think you kind of summed it up well. I thought Missouri, given the circumstances, I know Eli Drinkowitz said they were in the playoff mix, but the reality was it was going to take a lot for that team to get back in the playoff mix. But they went on the road, trade punches with South Carolina for 4 quarters. Brady Cook comes back, gives the team a spark. I think that's a good sign. We wonder how these teams that fall out of the playoff mix are going to respond. And Missouri played well. I suspect they will do the same thing here. I also suspect that Mississippi State, coming off the off week, hungry for an SEC win. They do have the Egg Bowl next week, but this is the last home game, of course, in Starkville for the season. I suspect that Mississippi State will be ready to fight on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. And certainly you got to believe, I know rivalries, they always say, throw the records out. I don't necessarily believe with that, but this will be the best chance to get a win in conference play for State. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would, because I would be surprised if they beat Ole Miss next week. Now, like you said, it is a rivalry, so you never know, but I think of the 2 remaining games, I would rather take my chances with Missouri.
Mm-hmm. And I keep hearing from Missouri fans, who, quite frankly, they weren't saying this early, Steven, but after last week, oh my God, our pass defense is awful. Everybody should be fired and all this, that, and the other. Well, that is one of the strengths of old Mississippi State. So is that the path, perhaps, to State pulling off the upset here, being able to throw? Michael Van Buren is emerging as one of the best young quarterbacks in the conference. And quite frankly, they're running the ball quite efficiently as well. So they've got some good balance, high-scoring game. Does that favor Mississippi State, and is that a path to pulling the upset?
Yeah, I think it is. I think going back to that Tennessee game, the run game for Mississippi State was a positive. And we saw what Missouri did last week with what Lenora Sellers was able to do in the passing game. So there's some good things happening for Mississippi State's offense right now. I think just thinking about how this game could play out, given the fact that Mississippi State's defense is at the bottom of the SEC, they're going to need to score some points here. So I think if you're Mississippi State, you're looking at this going, there's some opportunities here. We got the run game going. We should be able to throw the ball in the secondary. There are some questions, I think, about how the offensive line for Mississippi State could hold up. They've allowed, they're one of the, giving up a lot of sacks this year in the SEC. So those matchups, like if you can protect Van Buren, if you can get the ground game going, you're going to have to score, because I suspect Missouri's also going to score in what could be kind of an entertaining back and forth battle here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what odds do you think that? I know there are, like you said, there's questions about a team that is no longer in the playoff hunt. That was the goal all off season and in season, but now that they're out, there's concerns that there'll be a letdown. But again, this was the best Missouri looked all season. What's your confidence that they can carry that over and finish the season and do that 3 games in a row, even with the playoff carrot no longer there?
Fairly confident, although the calculus does change a little bit when you're 9 and you have 3 losses as opposed to 2, and you could kind of chart a path. 3's a little tougher. Still being ranked, I guess, in the rankings maybe sort of keeps the momentum going. I also think Brady Cook is just one of those quarterbacks that just seems like he's not going to let this team lose. He's not going to let this team show up on the road and have just a flat performance. So I guess that gives me confidence. Last week's game plus Brady Cook maybe being a little bit healthier kind of tells me that Missouri is going to show up here and not have a no-show on the road.
Yeah. All right, Steve, moment of truth. Who you got in this one?
I think we're going to see some points. So I like Missouri 34, Mississippi State 24.
Ooh. And Drink will say we're still in the playoffs.
Yeah. I speaking of spicy Twitter things, Drinkowitz stirring it up with Arkansas next week. Seems like it could be pretty spicy, right?
All right. How about this one, Steven? Let's move on to Vanderbilt at LSU. Speaking of hot seat here, Brian Kelly. Oh, my word. You better win this one, buddy. You are 7.5 point favorite at home. The over-under's 53.5 total points. Another night game. You get every game at night. You're still losing. I don't get it. 6:45 Central, 7:45 Eastern. Thoughts on this one?
I think the question is, what version of LSU are we getting here? Because, a couple losses in a row. Yes, they are at home, but the losses have stacked up. They're out of the top 25 now. We talked about it with Missouri. Missouri's kind of hanging in there, but what does LSU have to play for? So I'm curious to see how LSU responds. And I don't think you want a flat performance against Vanderbilt, because as this team has proven, they have been a giant killer. They took out Alabama. They took Texas to the brink. 2 weeks to get ready. To me, the big question is, what's the status of Diego Pavia? He's been banged up since that South Carolina game. If he's not 100%, I think it's going to be tough for Vanderbilt to have a shot at the upset.
Mm-hmm. Even if LSU can't score? I mean,
yeah.
Come on. What are we doing here? LSU 13 and 16 back-to-back conference games. That ain't going to get it done. Although, fortunately for LSU, it's not like Vanderbilt is a high-powered offense necessarily. But, buddy, I mean, what is the level of concern? Again, yeah, neutral site or not even neutral. It is Tiger Stadium. But, off-season, picking this game, I would have said, give me LSU by 3 touchdowns. But given that Vanderbilt's 2 weeks to prepare, a little bit healthier, LSU's on a downward spiral. Their coach is being questioned whether he's going to make it. The fans want him gone. Who knows if the fans even show up? I mean, certainly these are some of the best fans in the country. There will be fans there, but I don't think it's going to be a sellout. I don't think it'll be a full house, not for Vanderbilt. All the bad mojo. Could that be the difference in Vanderbilt pulling off another upset?
Yeah, I think if you're Vanderbilt, and let's assume Diego Pavia is healthy, you kind of smell blood in the water, right?
Yeah.
And you got a very vulnerable LSU team, even in a very difficult environment. And I think for Vanderbilt to win, the formula is what they've been doing all year, which is Pavia's rushing against an LSU rush defense that's not been very good, has struggled against mobile quarterbacks. You shorten the game. You don't let Garrett Nussmeier score, 4 touchdowns. You make it a 23-20 type of game, and you find a way in the fourth quarter to bend, but don't break on defense. And you let Pavia maybe extend one drive with a rush or something, and you steal the victory. So I think if LSU was in the playoff mix, I don't know that we're necessarily having kind of this conversation. It's probably a lot different one, but it feels like LSU is vulnerable, and given Vanderbilt's kind of track record this year of playing well against ranked opponents here, I think they can make this game very interesting.
Mm-hmm. But high scoring game, who does that favor? And a low scoring game, who would that favor?
I think if I'm Vanderbilt, I want a game in the 20s, like a 24-20, 27-24. I think the higher scoring game benefits Nussmeier and those LSU receivers.
Okay, Steven, moment of truth. Kelly getting fired on Sunday night.
I think he saves his job here. I think LSU wins. I think they wake up a little bit in the second half. Give me LSU 31, Vanderbilt 24.
Oh, God. That might be too close for comfort here. You know what?
It wouldn't do anything necessarily to quiet the noise, if you will. I think that's probably a good way to put it.
And then shout out Cousin Ricky, gave us a $20 donation. Appreciate you, brother. No trap games.
Guys.
The playoffs start this weekend. Lose, and this college football playoff is toast. Beat the hell out of Auburn. Gig 'em. Love the show. Appreciate you, Rick. But let's get into that, Steven. That's the one I want to do next. A&M at Auburn and the dreaded Hugh Freeze here. Well, the good guys are favored. I shouldn't say that. 2.5 points here. Over-under's 46.5 points. Now, maybe Hugh's the good guy. Maybe he could start to swing this thing around and start to rally back any support he has lost here, Steven. Is this a trap game? Mike Elko, we ain't looking ahead to Texas. I mean, Auburn. We're focused on Auburn, but what's your thoughts on that?
I think it is a trap game to some extent. I mean, a week before playing Texas, you are going on the road to play Auburn, a team that has been kind of all over the map. But we also saw last season that they pushed Georgia and they pushed Alabama. So I don't know, honestly, which Auburn team we're going to get. Because if they have the Auburn team that shows up and is -3 in turnover margin, they're not winning this game. Like, Auburn is going to have to play a clean game. And I think just from a matchup perspective, the turnover margin is one of those things that is probably going to be really important because it looks like a low scoring kind of defensive game on paper. So I've got my eye on turnovers, staying out of 3rd and long on defense, and also the two quarterbacks. I think Marcel Reed played with a lot of confidence against New Mexico State. If that carries over into this game, and they're going to need him to, a kind of little maybe tidbit about, I think, the Auburn defense. If you look at the quarterbacks that they faced, Taylon Green had, I think, the most rushing yards against Auburn in SEC play of his defenses faced. I think if I'm A&M, like, there's an opening here for Marcel Reed to have another really good game on the ground and kind of take some of that pressure off of Amari Daniels and EJ Smith, because they're going to probably need to manufacture some 3rd down conversions here, I think, to win this game.
Yeah, no, it's pretty fascinating, isn't it, Steven, that one of these teams is 5-1 in conference, the other one's 1-5. And that could go 6-1, 1-6. But Who do you think has the quarterback edge in this matchup? Because Peyton Thorne, I mean, again, we all know he's thrown a lot of interceptions, but he has quietly turned it around. Now, again, here lately, they've not been playing very good competition, but still, well, let's credit him, man. They were getting buried. They wanted him done. I mean, Auburn fans never want to see this guy again. His numbers are not as brutal as they were the first half of the season. Meanwhile, Marcel Reed, yeah, you could hold the South Carolina against him. I don't, because, again, he's forced into action here. He's not played a ton, but he has been highly efficient, and he's probably, to your point you just made, one of the top 5 rushing threats at the quarterback position in the conference. If I had to, right around, he may be 6 or something like that, but he's close to top 5. Who do you think's got the edge at quarterback here?
Man, that's a tough question. Personally, I like Marcel Reed, so I'll probably just pick him by default here, just because I think that he gives you a little bit more upside. I think we know what Peyton Thorne is, and I'm not talking like. I think if I had to win this game on Saturday, I want Marcel Reed's mobility. Certainly, Peyton Thorne gives you that too. I also think for Marcel Reed, he played against Florida in the Swamp, didn't seem fazed by it. Played at South Carolina, did the best he could in that one-sided game in the second half for Texas A&M. So going on the road in SEC play is never easy, and A&M's receiving core doesn't quite stack up against Auburn's. But it also feels like this is where the mobility, this is where the experience against other SEC teams on the road pays off too, potentially.
Which team you think has a better defense? Because again, all the bad things you can say about Auburn, the defense has been very good. And A&M, I thought, had a very good defense. They may still, but that was a pretty pathetic, is probably too strong a word, but the tackling was certainly pathetic against South Carolina. And to your point, 44 points. That's not on Marcel Reed. That's on the defense. So who do you think's got the better defense in this matchup?
I would still pick A&M. Like the difference makers of Scorton and Stewart and Turner, I would still want those guys on my side if I had to pick one on Saturday night. I do think just from a metric standpoint, Auburn is 9th in the country in defensive success rate, and A&M is 21st. So it's pretty close. I just kind of go with the Aggies, maybe in a close one.
Okay. And then last question. I don't even know if I have to ask this, Steve. I don't even know if I have to ask this. Who has the edge in coaching here? Mike Elko or Hugh Freeze?
It's got to be Mike Elko, right? Although I was a little bit worried when I saw him mention the Texas thing. I think it's just a slip up, but we can still have some fun with it. But no, I think this A&M team gets better from week to week. And also I think the in-game coaching that we've seen. Now, certainly the South Carolina game, it didn't work out, but it does feel like Elko and that staff know what they're doing. And I think they will keep them focused on Saturday night to keep things rolling.
Okay. Well, based on that, it sounds like you're going with A&M.
I am. They're going to need some of that, Mando deodorant on Saturday night. They might be sweating.
Shop Mando /SEC.
Texas A&M 24, Auburn 20.
Oh, okay. So a close one.
I think so, Mike. I mean, I just think Auburn at home fighting to keep their bowl hopes alive, and as much as, like you said, Peyton Thorne and Auburn's defense, they've been given a lot of criticism this year. In this spot, at the numbers for Auburn's defense, Peyton Thorne, the confidence he should have after last week, I think they can hang in there. I just think that A&M can make one or two more plays, and that's kind of trust and pass rush for Texas A&M and Marcel Reed's scrambling ability. Those two things, one or two plays in the fourth quarter, and they find a way to escape with a victory.
All right, last one, Stephen. Ole Miss at Florida. Ole Miss fighting still for a playoff. Right? I mean, they went out, they're in. I don't see any way they don't make it. But Florida's red hot. They're going to do everything in their power to prevent Ole Miss from making it. Ole Miss favored by 10. Over-unders 55.5 points. How about this, Stephen? Florida has won 3 home games in a row and all by double digits. Very impressive. But Ole Miss leads the country in sacks with 46 and tackles for loss 103. Florida has allowed 10 sacks, though. That's very good. That's 27th in the country here. Thoughts on this matchup? Sounds like Trey Harris is going to be good to go. Kiffin's telling everybody that'll listen we're as healthy as we've ever been. He's politicking already for the playoff here, Stephen. Thoughts on this matchup?
I think the first thing that jumps out is just the stakes of this game. Florida trying to get bowl eligible. Also, Florida just trying to finish with some momentum. I mean, that win over LSU was huge last week, but the biggest one is for Ole Miss. 2 wins away from the college football playoff, and they crossed off the biggest hurdle against Georgia. Now they get Florida, Mississippi State to close the year. We can talk about the offense too, like with Trey Harris coming back, and I think the matchups in this game favor Ole Miss with the secondary of Florida being beat up. Prior to last week, Florida really wasn't getting the quarterback to the ground. That really worked out against LSU. But I think the Ole Miss defense here, Pete Golden has done a great job this year with this group. You've also got the studs up front on the defensive line. And for as much as I like the Ole Miss offense, the matchup here, I think the Ole Miss defense is a big reason why they can go into these kind of environments and win and sort of entrench their spot in the college football playoff. Very interested to see how Lagway handles the Ole Miss defense, because if you look at his kind of production this year against Kentucky and against LSU, a lot of big plays. A lot of the intermediate stuff, there's been some questions about kind of getting more consistency there. So if I'm Ole Miss, shut down the run, force Lagway, kind of 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9. Don't give up big plays over the top of you, and sort of make Florida play from behind. This offense for Ole Miss just has so much firepower. If it's a lower scoring game, I think that favors Florida.
Right. And again, assuming Trey Harris plays, which Kiffin says is looking good, Ole Miss, I mean, what is the most optimistic outlook here, Stephen? I know SEC defense on the road, but optimistically, if everything clicks for Ole Miss, which quite frankly it has been, how many points could they score in this matchup, you think?
That's a good question, Mike. I mean, I would say definitely over 30. I think that seems pretty reasonable. I would even go a little bit higher than that, maybe like 34, 38, somewhere in there. It also kind of depends on sort of the style, because if Florida gets that run game going, they can sort of shorten the game. Whereas if Ole Miss is ahead early, they're scoring, they're hitting the big plays, it feels like that ceiling gets a little bit closer to 38. So I think with a full complement of weapons and the way Jackson Dart has played recently, I would say at least over 30 on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. And there's been a lot of discussion about Florida. Their defense has certainly improved. I mean, they completely limited Central Florida. I thought they did a remarkable job against Tennessee, Kentucky, and last week, of course, against LSU. But not. I mean, they held their own against Georgia. Georgia scored 34, had 3 interceptions. So, I mean, aside from the interceptions, how good were they really? And Texas, of course, went up and down the field. They could have scored 100 on them, if they wanted to that game. Now, that could just be a product of 2 elite teams. But I think Ole Miss is just as elite as Georgia and Texas. Am I wrong there? And even if Florida has taken major strides on the defensive side of the football, it may not show itself this weekend. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would. I would call myself kind of a skeptic on Florida's defense, but I do think I've become a little bit more of a believer in the idea that they are better. I think that a lot of this for Saturday comes down to how well they can affect Jackson Dart. I mean, we go back to last week and how much they pressured Garrett Nussmeier. Can they do that again on Saturday? Because if they can, we saw that's kind of how Kentucky was able to slow down Jackson Dart. It's getting the pass rush, getting to him, and not allowing those big plays to click. So that Florida pass rush that generated 7 sacks has got to show up again this week.
Mm-hmm. All right, Steven. So, moment of truth. Does Lane, I'm not even calling the W word anymore. Does Lane get it done and Florida find out, man, this is why we wanted the guy? Or do they turn around and say, buddy, were we wrong? I apologize, old Billy. Billy, let's give you a contract extension. You deserve every bit of it. Shove it up Lane where it don't shine no more. Who wins this one?
Man, if Florida wins this game and there's a give Billy Napier a contract extension, what a complete turnaround during the season. Give me the Lane train, Mike. I think Ole Miss is 2 wins away from the playoff. I think they get one this week. Give me Ole Miss 31, Florida 24.
Okay, and so far, Steven, I don't believe you've given us your MyBookie lock of the week. Where are you going when it comes to your lock?
I don't know if I should give one because I struggled last week, but give me Alabama as my lock of the week.
Man, you hate the Sooners, so I don't blame you the way they've been playing. But all right, we're running short on time. I hate to scooch you off here, Steven, but before you go, can you tell the fine folks how to follow you and how to find your work?
Absolutely. AthlonSports.com is where you can read all my work. At AthlonSteven on Twitter, Stephen L. CFB over on Facebook and Instagram.
All right, so there's the predictions. We got Cousin Shane coming up in just a minute for our latest SEC mailbag. But until then, we appreciate you, Stephen, for coming by, dropping all all this knowledge. We appreciate each and every one of you. We'll catch you in about 2 minutes here.
Hey, buddy, this beer's for you, Mike, and Cousin Shane. That SEC podcast loves the Pirate, and the Pirate loves that SEC podcast.